Aiden Brooks, a wealthy and arrogant millionaire, agreed to a bet that would change his life in ways he never expected. He was well known and always used to winning in business and in life and competition. But when his close friend Ethan made a bold challenge at a lavish Las Vegas party, Aiden was intrigued. Ethan smirked and threw out the challenge. He says, "Aiden, let's see if you can win this one. I bet you wouldn't have the guts to marry a woman who doesn't fit your usual type." Aiden, known for dating stunning women, was taken aback. But always eager to prove himself, he raised an eyebrow and asked, "And what's the prize?" With a mischievous grin, Ethan raised his glass and said, $1 million to the winner, but you have to marry her and stay married for at least 7 months. Feeling the rush of competition and the allure of a financial challenge, Aiden agreed without hesitation. The woman Ethan had in mind was Olivia Foster, someone who didn't fit conventional beauty standards. Aiden didn't know her, but to him, it was just another deal to win. Days later, Aiden received more details about Olivia. She was confident, independent, and strong-willed, nothing like the women Aiden was used to. This intrigued him even more. Used to being in control, he wondered how he would handle someone who wouldn't bend to his will. Their first meeting took place at a high-end restaurant. When Olivia arrived, Aiden immediately noticed how different she was from anyone he had ever met. She didn't seem intimidated by the fancy setting or by Aiden himself. Instead, she met his gaze with firm confidence. "You must be Aiden Brooks," Olivia said directly as she sat down. "And you must be Olivia Foster," Aiden replied with a controlled smile, extending his hand. She hesitated briefly before shaking it with a firm grip, showing her determination. "Let's not beat around the bush," Olivia began, her tone straightforward. "I know why we're here. I know about the bet, the terms, and the conditions." Aiden was surprised by her bluntness but didn't show it. "And yet you still agreed to meet?" he asked, curious about her motivations. Olivia paused for a moment before answering. "Let's just say I have my reasons. I'm not naive. 6 months may seem short, but a lot can change in that time. If you think you can manipulate or control me, you're mistaken." Aiden smiled. Olivia was proving to be more of a challenge than he had anticipated, which only made things more interesting for him. As their first meeting ended, Aiden found himself increasingly intrigued by Olivia. She wasn't like anyone he had met before. She wasn't afraid of him, and that piqued his curiosity, even admiration. Days passed, and Aiden couldn't stop thinking about how to approach the next step. He was used to being the master of the game. But now it seemed Olivia had her own moves. Their second meeting took place at a modest cafe, a far cry from the glamorous restaurants Aiden usually frequented. Olivia had suggested the spot, and Aiden, curious, agreed. He wanted to understand who she was and why she had agreed to what seemed like a temporary marriage. When Aiden arrived, Olivia was already there, sipping tea with a calm smile. She greeted him warmly, without the coldness of their first encounter, but still carried herself with that same unshakable confidence. "I thought you preferred 5-star restaurants," Olivia teased as Aiden sat down. "Sometimes it's good to break the routine," Aiden replied, trying to sound casual. Though he felt slightly out of his element, they chatted for a while, exchanging surface-level details. But Olivia quickly got to the point. "If we're really going through with this, I want to make a few things clear," she said, placing her cup on the table. "I'm not interested in your money or your luxury lifestyle. 6 months is 6 months, and I plan on walking away from this exactly the same as I entered." Aiden watched her carefully. He knew she was being honest. Olivia was the type of woman who knew what she wanted, and clearly, marriage wasn't something she saw as a way to climb the social ladder like many others might. "So, what do you want?" Aiden asked, genuinely curious. "Freedom," she answered without hesitation. "I want you to know that even though we're entering into this agreement, I won't be controlled by you. I have my own life, and that's not going to change because of a temporary marriage." Aiden smiled. It wasn't the answer he expected, but at the same time, he didn't mind granting Olivia this freedom. To him, marriage was just a formality to win the bet. If she wanted to keep her independence, it wouldn't bother him. Fine, Aiden agreed. 6 months after that, we go our separate ways. Olivia watched him for a moment, as if wanting to be sure he truly agreed to the terms. She had accepted this challenge with a plan in mind and was determined to ensure everything went according to her wishes. Deep down, she knew Aiden might try to manipulate the situation, but she also trusted her own strength to resist his influence. The meeting ended on friendly terms, with both leaving with their roles clearly defined. Olivia would keep her independence, and Aiden would ensure that the marriage was nothing more than a formality. But as the days passed and the wedding date approached, Aiden couldn't help but feel that maybe this game wasn't as simple as he had imagined. The wedding took place in a cold, unceremonious manner, like a carefully orchestrated business contract. Aiden Brooks, with his strategic mindset, already saw himself as the winner of the bet. He was certain the 6 months would fly by and that Olivia, no matter how stubborn, would eventually give in to the luxurious lifestyle he was about to offer her. Right after the ceremony, Aiden took Olivia to his massive penthouse in the heart of Los Angeles, a monument to his wealth. The huge glass windows reflected the city lights, and the interior was filled with the most expensive and exclusive decor. To him, this was the real battleground where he would win Olivia over through the power of his material world. But from the very first moment, Olivia made it clear she wasn't going to back down. As soon as she stepped into the penthouse, she maintained a distant demeanor. The look she gave Aiden wasn't one of admiration, but of defiance. 6 months, Aiden, not a day more, she said firmly, walking over to one of the large windows and looking at the city without being impressed by the luxury around her. Aiden smiled, confident. He was used to this kind of resistance in the beginning. Every woman who had been in his life eventually bent to his charm and wealth. Olivia wouldn't be any different. Or so he thought. In the first few days after the wedding, Aiden tried everything to impress her. He showered her with expensive jewelry, designer clothes, and luxurious trips, all with the expectation that Olivia would start to adapt to the lifestyle he dictated. But to his frustration, she refused it all. Olivia insisted on sticking to her simple, modest routine, never giving in to the trappings of wealth. "I don't need these things, Aiden," she would say with a calmness that only made him more irritated. It deeply bothered Aiden. For the first time, his authority was being challenged. It wasn't just about the bet anymore, now it was personal. He had to win Olivia over somehow. He needed to prove that, in the end, he was the one in control. That's when he started playing more aggressively. He stopped her from going to work, offering reasons like, "You don't need a paycheck anymore," or, "Your role as my wife." When Olivia insisted, he made her wait for hours for meetings she thought were important. Aiden manipulated schedules and situations, anything to maintain control. But Olivia didn't give in. She was a solid rock against Aiden's attempts, and that only intensified his desire to break her. Their relationship became a minefield. Small provocations surfaced in trivial conversations, where Olivia, with sharp words, diffused every attempt Aiden made to make her feel inferior or controlled. One particularly tense night, Aiden tried a more emotional approach. "I don't understand you, Olivia," he said, staring at her with a mix of frustration and curiosity. "Any other woman would be happy to live this kind of luxury, but you act like it's not enough. What do you really want?" Olivia, who had been impassive until that moment, finally lifted her eyes. They gleamed with an intensity Aiden hadn't expected. "What do I want? I want respect, Aiden. I'm not a piece on your chessboard. You think you can control me with money, but you're wrong. Money doesn't buy dignity or integrity. You might have all these things around you, but you're empty inside, and that's what you can't stand." Her words hit him like a punch to the gut. For the first time, Aiden felt that he might be losing more than just control. Olivia wasn't just resisting his power, she was dismantling the facade he had built over the years. That scared him. No one had ever challenged him like this. And the fact that Olivia saw beyond his wealth made Aiden feel exposed. But instead of backing off, Aiden decided to tighten his grip. He started making plans to isolate Olivia further, convinced that if he could just break her resolve, he would finally win. He booked extravagant vacations and events, forcing Olivia to attend them despite her protests. He made her life as uncomfortable as possible, all in the name of winning the bet. One night, after a particularly exhausting gala he had dragged her to, Olivia snapped. "This isn't working, Aiden," she said, her voice sharp with exhaustion. "This isn't a marriage. It's a prison. You're suffocating me with your world of wealth and control." Aiden, irritated but curious about her frustration, shot back. "You're being unreasonable. You should be grateful for what I've given you. You're not like the others, who would jump at the chance to live this life." Olivia's eyes narrowed. "That's the problem. You think everyone is after your money, that it can buy everything. But you're wrong. I'm not impressed, and I'm certainly not here to please you." Her words stung, but Aiden refused to admit that she was getting to him. Instead, he doubled down. He set up one final test, an extravagant trip to Malibu, where they would stay in a secluded mansion with no distractions. The hope was that the change of scenery, the isolation, and the luxury would force Olivia, but when they arrived, Olivia's reaction was far from what Aiden expected. Instead of being awed by the beauty of the coast or the opulence of their accommodations, she was completely indifferent. "I thought you'd finally get it," Aiden said, frustration bubbling over. "This is everything you could want. Why won't you accept it?" Olivia turned to face him, her gaze steady and unwavering. "I don't want your luxury, Aiden. I want something real. I want respect, not a cage of jewels and designer clothes. I want to be seen as more than just an accessory to your wealth." For the first time, Aiden paused. Her words cut through the armor he had built around himself. He realized that this wasn't just about winning a bet anymore. It was about facing himself. Olivia wasn't rejecting him because she was being stubborn. She was rejecting the very thing he had based his life on: his wealth, his control, his need to dominate. Aiden found himself at a crossroads. He could continue to fight, to control, to manipulate. Or he could finally let go of the power that had defined him for so long and face the vulnerability that came with being truly seen, not just as a man with money, but as someone who might have something deeper to offer. In a moment of rare self-reflection, Aiden made a decision. He chose to stop fighting. The next morning, he sat down with Olivia on the balcony, the Malibu sun rising over the ocean. "I don't know what I was trying to prove," he said, his voice quieter than usual. "I thought I could win you over with everything I've built. But I was wrong. I see now that it's not about that. It's about respect, and I haven't given you that. I'm sorry." Olivia looked at him, surprised by his sincerity. It was a side of Aiden she hadn't seen before. "It's not about money, Aiden," she replied softly. "It's about understanding. You can't buy love or respect. They have to be earned." Aiden nodded slowly, realizing that this entire experience had been a wake-up call. He had spent so much time trying to control his world, he had never considered that true connection came from giving others the space to be themselves. For the first time, Aiden felt something he had never experienced before, a sense of humility. The walls he had built around his heart started to crumble, and the man who had once believed he had everything now saw that the most important things in life couldn't be bought. The rest of their time together was a slow but steady transformation. Aiden and Olivia learned to meet each other halfway. They didn't become the perfect couple, but they found a new kind of respect. Aiden stopped trying to manipulate her, and Olivia, in turn, began to see that perhaps Aiden's struggles with control were a result of deeper insecurities. They began to understand each other on a level they hadn't expected. 6 months later, As their contract marriage came to an end, neither of them was the same person they had been when they started. Aidan had lost the arrogance that once defined him, and Olivia had gained a new understanding of how to navigate relationships with someone who had once been an adversary. On the day they signed the final paperwork to dissolve their marriage, Aidan looked at Olivia one last time. "I know this wasn't what either of us expected," he said quietly, "but I'm glad it happened. I've learned more from you than I ever thought possible." Olivia smiled, a rare softness in her eyes. "I'm glad too, Aidan. We both needed to grow. And maybe this was the way we were meant to." They shook hands, no longer adversaries, but two people who had come out of a difficult journey with a mutual respect for each other. As they parted ways, neither of them knew what the future held. But for the first time, Aidan didn't feel the need to control it. And for Olivia, she was content knowing that she had remained true to herself, no matter what. Months passed since Aidan and Olivia's marriage ended, but their lives had changed in ways they hadn't anticipated. Aidan returned to his business empire with a newfound humility, a shift in his perspective that surprised even those who had worked with him for years. His competitive nature remained, but it was no longer driven by a need to dominate or control. Instead, he became more attuned to the people around him, learning to listen, to collaborate, and even to trust. The walls he had so carefully built around himself began to crack open, piece by piece, and he found that true success came not just from financial triumphs, but from the relationships he nurtured along the way. Olivia, on the other hand, returned to her independent life, but the impact of her time with Aidan lingered. She had always been confident, but her interactions with Aidan had taught her the power of vulnerability. She had once prided herself on being unshakable, but she realized that her strength came not from avoiding emotional connections, but from embracing them when they came. It wasn't about letting go of her independence, it was about finding balance between her own needs and the needs of those she cared about. Olivia began to take on new projects, ones that allowed her to build a legacy of her own, a mix of personal empowerment and social causes that aligned with her values. But neither of them could truly forget the other. The lessons they had learned together resonated long after the wedding ring had been taken off. Occasionally, their paths would cross at events or in mutual circles, and there would be brief moments where they caught each other's eye, a quiet acknowledgement of the transformation they had both undergone. One evening, a year after their marriage ended, Aidan found himself at a charity gala in Santa Monica, a glamorous event that attracted the city's elite. As he made his way through the crowd, exchanging pleasantries with business associates and old friends, he caught a glimpse of Olivia. She stood across the room, effortlessly commanding attention without trying to, her presence as striking as ever. This time, there was no challenge, no bet, no need to prove anything. It was just two people who had once been in each other's lives for a brief, transformative chapter. Olivia saw him too, and for a moment, their gazes locked. She didn't approach him immediately, but he saw the faintest of smiles tug at her lips. She was different now, more at ease with herself, more open, but still the same woman who had stood up to him all those months ago. He admired her more than he could admit. Aidan hesitated for a moment, then made his way toward her. He wasn't sure what he was hoping for, but something inside him told him that this wasn't just a coincidence. There was more to be said, more to be understood. "Olivia," he said, his voice calm but sincere. "Well, if it isn't Aidan Brooks," she replied, her tone light, but her eyes were warm. "You're looking well. I could say the same about you," he responded, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "It's been a while." "How have you been? Busy?" Olivia said, her expression shifting slightly, as if to give him a glimpse of the real woman behind her composed exterior. "I've been working on a few things. Projects I care about." "It's been fulfilling," Aidan nodded. "I'm glad to hear that. I've been doing some work of my own. Personal projects. Trying to live a little less for the boardroom and more for, well, for something that matters." They stood in silence for a moment, the years of tension between them having melted into something different, something more genuine. There was no need for pretense, no competition. They had both changed, in ways neither of them could have predicted. "You know," Aiden began, breaking the silence, "I've been thinking about that bet. And about everything that happened. I realized something during those 6 months. I wasn't trying to win you over with money or status. I was trying to win. Well, I don't know what I was trying to win. But you showed me that I've been chasing the wrong things for most of my life." Olivia raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "And what have you been chasing now?" Aiden smiled, a little sheepishly. "Real connections. The kind that don't come with strings attached. The kind that you don't have to buy. It's funny, but I never realized how much I had been missing out on." Olivia nodded, her expression softening. "I think we both learned a lot from each other. You taught me that strength isn't about being invulnerable. And I taught you that there's more to life than just winning." Aiden's smile grew, genuine this time. "I think you were right about everything." For a long moment, they stood there, not as adversaries, not as former strangers bound by a bet, but as two people who had experienced something profound and who had come out of it with a deeper understanding of themselves and each other. "I never thought we'd end up here," Aiden said, almost to himself. "But I'm glad we did." Olivia's eyes flickered with a trace of that same defiance from the first time they met, but there was no bitterness in it now. "Me too," she said. "But let's not get ahead of ourselves. We're not exactly best friends, Aiden." Aiden chuckled. "Fair enough. But I'd like to think we're on better terms now." "We are," Olivia said with a smile. "We're just two people who learn from each other. Nothing more, nothing less." As the night wore on, they found themselves talking more and more, the barriers that had once existed between them now gone. The evening felt different than any gala Aiden had attended before. It wasn't about power or prestige. It was about two people, imperfect but growing, finding a quiet connection in the midst of the chaos. As they parted ways, Aiden couldn't help but feel a sense of peace. The challenge he had once sought in Olivia had shifted into something more meaningful. And though their paths were still different, Aiden knew he had learned something invaluable from their time together. Olivia, too, left the event with a sense of clarity. She had gained something she hadn't expected from the experience, an understanding of herself, and perhaps a deeper understanding of the world around her. For the first time in a long while, she felt free, not just from the confines of the bet, but from the need to prove herself to anyone. And as they both walked away from that night, it wasn't the victory of the bet that lingered in their minds. It was the quiet realization that the real win had been in the transformation they had both undergone, something far more lasting than any challenge, or money, or pride.